Hey guys, thanks for joining me for another episode of Learn to Play Games. My name is Lance, and today we're going to take a look at Legendary Big Trouble in Little China. This is one of the newer games by Upper Deck, and it is part of the Legendary series, so you can potentially use some of the components of this with some of the other games and vice versa. And for those of you that are familiar with other Legendary games, this one is very similar to some of those, with some rule tweaks and things like that. So for those of you that have played other games, this one will be very easy to pick up on. So this is a 1 to 5 player game that takes roughly an hour to 2 hours to play, and it is a fully cooperative deck builder. So all the players are working together to defeat the enemy or enemies, depending upon who you're facing. So the game itself is based in the Big Trouble in Little China universe, and so as the players are playing, they're going to be building cards using the famous characters from the movies such as Jack Burton, Gracie Law, Wang Chi, and many of the other ones to improve their deck and make it more powerful as they try to defeat whatever villain they randomly select at the beginning of the game, which could be David Lo Pan, the six-shooter, or even Chang Dai, which is the ultimate bad god. So each game is going to run a little bit differently, as there are 9 heroes that are included in the base set, and you're only going to use 5 of them in each game, and those can be randomized, or you can select which ones you want to play. And then on top of that, the mastermind will also be randomly selected, or you could choose which one you want to face, and each of those will also have a scheme, which there is a number of schemes, and so each game will run a little bit differently depending upon how those different cards come up. And so the players are going to, in standard customary fashion with deck builders, start the game with a standardized deck of cards, and then as the game progresses, they will build their decks by buying cards from the Hero HQ and adding those to their hands. So as far as my opinions of this game, I was a big fan of the movie. I enjoyed it growing up as a child, and so I was really interested to see what they were going to do with this game, and I have enjoyed some of the other Legendary games that they've put out. So I was very interested in checking this one out, and it doesn't disappoint. I had a good time with it. I do enjoy the cooperative deck builders. I'm not so much a competitive deck builder, but I do like the cooperative ones where you're working with the other players to defeat the final boss or whatever. And I had a lot of fun with this one and continued to bring this one out to the table as it just works really well. They've made it a little bit different, so for those of you that have played Aliens Legendary or Predator Legendary, where those games can be quite difficult, this one kind of rides the middle of the road where it's challenging, but definitely a little bit easier, at least that I found so far, depending upon how the cards come up, of course. I mean, some games you're just not going to win. So that I really liked, and the artwork they did a really good job on. It definitely captured some of the movies. Some of the characters looked a little weird, but overall the artwork was very well done, and I'm definitely interested to see if they do any expansions to this or anything like that. I would have liked to see the board just to be, or the box to be just a little bit bigger, because the neoprene mat you have to kind of fold, and so over time it seems like those creases are hard to get out. So I kind of keep mine separate and out of the box. But other than that, I like the game. But I also want to see what you guys think. I'd like to start evolving this channel into something a little bit different, as far as I like to give my opinions, but then I also want to hear yours. So please leave some of those in the comment section below. Did you like this game? Would you have changed anything, or did you just not like it, and for what reasons? Why didn't you like it? Let me know what you guys think, and I'd love to hear your opinions on it so that we can kind of get a conversation going, and so when people come to this channel, they get to see not only what I think of the game, but also some of the other people that have played it, so that we have a little bit more variety. So let's go ahead and head to the table, and I'll teach you guys how to play. For those of you that have played a Legendary game before, a lot of these cards and symbols are going to look very familiar, as they've used the same symbols across most of their games. For those of you that haven't, I'm going to go ahead and break down each of these cards and go through the different effects on them. So each of you will start with the 3 cards at the top, which are the Chang Xing Strategists and the Chang Xing Warriors, and then each player will be dealt 2 random mediocre heroes from the mediocre hero deck. Each of these cards is going to have different symbols on it, so like I said, at the top is going to be the name of the card, and then the classification. So as you can see, these are hero cards, and then moving down, we have the star symbol, which is a resource that you'll be able to use to purchase additional heroes from the Hero HQ, which I'll show later on. Then you also have strike symbol cards, which are the slashes here, and these will be used to deal damage to the enemies and potentially kill them. Finally, with the mediocre hero cards, they're also going to grant you either resources or strikes, and we'll also have some text here that will possibly give you more of whatever they're providing you. And then in the bottom corner is going to be a number, which is the purchase cost of that card. And as you can see, these top 3 cards do not have a purchase value, as you will not be able to purchase additional ones in the game. So moving down to some of our other cards, we have the hero cards that will be generated at the beginning of the game. There'll be a certain number of heroes, which there are 9 included in the game, and so each of these also has a name on the top, and it will list the specific hero from the deck that it's from. So this one is from the Jack Burton deck. Some of these cards will have different icons on the side, which we're going to go over what those do. They will normally grant bonuses to further cards that are played after those symbols are played that match. And that will be found in the text here. And as you can see, most of the hero cards are going to have more text in here that will give you different abilities. And a lot of them are more powerful than your starting cards. As you can see, this one has 3 slashes with a potential to get more in the text, where this one only provides 1. And again, in the bottom corner of these cards is going to be a purchase value, as you'll have to spend resources to purchase those and add those to your deck in the game. Moving over to some of the villain cards, let's go ahead and take a look at a breakdown of these. So at the beginning of the game, you're going to randomly choose a mastermind card, which this one is the 6-shooter and is classified as a mastermind. So you'll randomize that. From there, then you'll grab the 4 wound cards that are associated with that particular mastermind, and he's going to tell you some different pieces of information. So on his card is going to be the number of victory points that he is worth, which we'll cover what that is a little bit later. And then he's also going to have a special condition or conditions that will have different effects. So this particular one adds 6 to his strike value if there is a villain in Chinatown. From here, then it also is going to tell you what this mastermind leads, so what gang he leads. So when he is included, or when you randomly choose him, he is always going to lead the Wing Kong gang, and so you'll grab that set of villains to add to the villain deck. Finally, he's going to list what the Master Strike effect is when the Master Strike is drawn from the villain deck. So each time that is drawn, it will have the effects that are listed. In order to cause a wound to the mastermind, you must do 7 or more strikes, depending upon if the conditions are met or not. When you're able to do enough damage to wound him, these cards will be randomly shuffled and placed underneath him, face down, and you will draw one of these randomly and resolve the effects of the card. Once you do, then that will be added to your victory pile. And when you've done 4 wounds to him, then you'll enter into the final showdown, which will show what that does later. From there, once you've selected your mastermind, you'll also randomly draw a scheme card, which is going to give you special setup instructions and will potentially list other effects, such as how evil wins or the loss conditions. And sometimes it will also list what the twist effect cards will do, the scheme twist cards. So for example, with this one, you'll include 8 scheme twist cards in your villain deck, and then when you draw the 1st, 3rd, 5th, and 7th scheme twist card, you'll have the effects listed there. And when you draw the 2nd, 4th, and 6th scheme twist card, then you'll have those effects, which are different than the top ones. And again, like I said, the Master Strike and the scheme, you'll reference these 2 cards in order to determine what these do. The final set of cards we're going to look at are the rest of the villain cards and some of the basic cards that are also included that you'll run into throughout the game. So with the villain cards, you're going to notice on the top of the card, again, will be the name of that particular villain or card, and then directly underneath that is the group that that particular villain is from, and if it is a henchman or a straight-up villain. So for example, this is from the henchman set, and this one over here is a villain from the Wing Kong gang, and then a villain from the monster set. And there's a number of different sets that are included in the game, and if you remember when we were talking about the mastermind, he specifically said that he led the Wing Kong gang. So this deck would be one of the decks that you must include when you're making the villain deck. And then the rest would be randomized, so you might have the monsters or other decks. And then you would include 1 or more of the henchman decks, which is also listed on a graph, which we'll cover when we create that deck. From there, then you're also going to have some other information on the cards. So in the bottom corner here is the number of victory points that that card is worth at the end of the game. And some of the cards will also have text on them, which will have different effects. And so there are 4 different effects total. You have escape effects. So if this villain makes it off of the board and escapes the city, then you would apply that effect when that happens. You have ambush effects, which will happen when that card is revealed from the villain deck the first time, and so then you would conduct those effects. You have fight effects, so when you combat that villain, you must resolve those effects or meet the requirements of those effects in order to fight him. And then the final one is bribe, which is not listed in the rule book, but I did some checking online. And basically a bribe is, instead of just using slashes to defeat these guys, you can actually use the stars or resources as well. So you can basically bribe them with money as opposed to just being able to fight them. Or you could combine the two and use some slashes or strikes and some resources. So that's how that works. So I just wanted to cover that because, like I said, it's not in the rule book. Over here, then we have the 3 basic kind of cards that you're going to run into. The first is the wound card, and those are all the same. It's a direct copy. There are no different types of wounds, and each time you are required to take a wound, you will add a wound to your discard pile. And when it comes up, it's basically just a dead card. It doesn't give you any resources, and it does list the way that you can heal it at the bottom of the card, which will allow you to remove it from your deck. And there's some other cards that will do the same, will let you heal wounds and such, like Uncle Chew and a couple other cards. Then we have the bystanders. So bystanders, again, will give you victory points at the end of the game. And you have the basic bystander, which you'll have a number of copies of this card in your bystander deck. And then you also have specialist bystanders, which again will give you victory points, and will also have some sort of like special condition for them. And other than that, they work the same way, which we'll show in the game. Finally, we have the board itself, and each section is going to be labeled where the cards go, and it's easy to follow, and we're going to cover that during setup. One thing I did want to go over real quick is the city itself. It's where the enemies are going to come out. And so we have 5 spaces in the city: the sewers, bank, rooftops, streets, and bridge before the enemy escapes. And then Chinatown itself is only going to be considered the 2 spaces that are underneath it, so the rooftops and the streets. For board setup, the first thing you're going to go ahead and do is put out your 25 Uncle Chew cards, your 20 wound cards, and your 32 bystander cards, which you can go ahead and shuffle up since you have some of the different bystanders in there. Once you have them shuffled up, you can go ahead and place them out on the bystander set, and you'll notice each of these stacks that I have is a lot less than the cards required. This is just to show you guys how the game plays, not necessarily having all the cards out there. From here, then, we're going to go ahead and choose our mastermind. So we're going to go ahead and randomly choose a mastermind from the set. And so we're going to go ahead and use the 6 shooter. From there, then he's going to have his 4 cards that he'll have. So you'll shuffle those up and place those face down underneath his card on the mastermind stack. From there, then you're going to go ahead and randomly deal out a scheme card to go along with him. And then on the scheme card, it's going to tell you any special setup instructions. So we're going to have 8 scheme twist cards added to our villain deck. We're going to have 5 master strike cards added to that deck as well. And then, as you guys can see on this chart here, we're going to go ahead and add villain groups, henchman groups, and some bystanders to that based on the number of players. So I'm going to go ahead and set up for a 2-player game. So I need 2 villain groups, and you would randomly choose these normally, but we're going to go ahead and do this non-selectively. So we're going to add the 8 cards from the villain monsters, the 8 cards from the villain Wing Kong gang, and the 8 henchmen cards. One more important thing to deal with when we're choosing our villain cards is each mastermind is going to have a specific group that he leads. So this particular mastermind always leads the Wing Kong gang, so you must include that set with the sets that are randomly selected. And then finally, like I said, we'll have 2 bystanders added into that villain stack. So we'll take 2 bystander cards from the set, And then finally, we're going to go ahead and shuffle all these cards up and place them face down in the villain deck. Finally, we're going to create the hero deck. So there are 9 different heroes included in the game, and you're going to go ahead and pick 5 heroes at random from those 9. Each of these hero sets is going to have 14 cards in it, except for Jack Burton and Wang Chi. Each of those is going to have 19 cards in it. So let's go ahead and take a look at Jack Burton. And so on his, he has his 14 regular cards. And he has 5 additional cards. So when you're using one of those particular heroes, you're going to go ahead and remove 5 of those cards from that set. In order to do that, you're going to go ahead and remove one of the 3 sets that has the 5 identical cards. So you could either remove this set here, that set there, or this set here. So in our game, we're going to go ahead and remove this set, and then the rest of the cards would be added to the hero stack. Now, if you're playing a 5-player game, then you would add 1 additional hero set to that to have a total deck size of 84 cards. Otherwise, you would have a set of 70 cards. So in our hero set, we'll have Jack Burton, we'll have the Pork Chop Express, Margot, Egg Chan, and Eddie. Once you have all those cards, you're going to go ahead and shuffle them up into a deck a couple times, and then you'll deal out the top 5 cards from those onto the hero's HQ. And the rest of the cards can be placed face down on the hero deck. And then finally, we're going to go over player setup. So each player in the game will receive 2 randomly dealt mediocre heroes. So you'll go ahead and shuffle up the mediocre hero deck and randomly deal out 2 to each of the players. And then each player will also receive 4 of the Changsing Warriors and 6 of the Strategists. From there, each of the players can go ahead and shuffle up those cards. Now, before any of the players start their turns, the first thing that each player is going to do is draw the top 6 cards from their draw pile. So we're going to take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 from our players pile. And then from there, you're going to go ahead and choose one player to be the starting player. And play will proceed in a clockwise order from there. So during a player's turn, there are 3 different things that that player will do. The first thing he's going to do is flip over the top card of the villain deck and reveal it. So with it happening to be a villain, then it's going to move into the first space of the city. And then you're going to take a look at the card, and if there's any ambush effects, then you're going to resolve those now. So with the Master Cleaver, it says the current player takes a wound if there is at least 1 henchman in the city, which right now the city has no henchmen in it, so we will not suffer that ambush effect. From here, then it's going to go ahead and move into the player's turn. So the player will be able to play cards from their hand, so let's go ahead and see what our player has. So he has 1 strike card, and we have 5 resource cards. Now, the 1 card is a mediocre hero, and with this one, it says, I gain +1 resource if the bus tourist bystander has entered play this game, which it has not yet. We have not had any bystanders from the bus. So right now we have 5 resources and 1 strike. As the only villain out has 6 strikes and the mastermind needs 7, our strike card isn't going to really be useful for us this turn. So from there, then we can go into trying to buy some stuff. So we have 5 points to buy cards. Now we can choose to spend all those points and buy 1 card of a value of 5, or we can break them up and buy a couple of cards if we're able to. As right now there aren't any cards out that are 2 points, we can only buy 1 card. So we can choose to take a card that's worth 5, or we can buy one of the other ones. So let's go ahead and just buy one of the other ones right now. So we'll go ahead and buy this. And so this card automatically is going to go to our discard pile. And then we're going to go, we spent 3 cards for that. So we'll move those over. And we have 3 cards left, which we don't have any use for at this point. So these cards will be discarded at the end of the turn, as we can't hold on to any cards. And any heroes that we had or that we purchased will be refilled in the hero in the HQ set, and then we can go ahead and draw 6 new cards. And our turn is over, and it'll move to the next player's turn. So let's go ahead and take a look at another example of a player's turn. So our second player over here has gone ahead and drawn his cards, and so he has 3 strike cards and 3 resource cards. At the top of his turn, again, he would flip over the top card of the villain deck, and it's another villain. This one's a henchman, so first things first, any villains that are in front of it are going to be pushed. So we'll move this one over to make room for this one, and that's the only time that villains are going to be able to be moved. So for example, if our villain had started here, then this guy would simply just take up the next spot and would not shove him any farther. Or if he was over here, any gaps will not be causing villains to be moved over. Okay, so from there, then this one has a fight effect again, so we don't have to worry about any ambushing effects or anything. So then we'll go over and have our player take their turn. So we have 3 strikes, which actually can defeat the henchman villain at this point, and then we also have 3 resources to purchase stuff. So let's go ahead and make a purchase real quick. So we'll spend our 3 resources here to purchase this card here. So that'll go to the discard, and then we'll flip over the next card. And then we'll spend our 3 strikes to defeat him. So it says, during a fight, you're going to reveal the top card of your deck. If it is a 0-cost card that provides resources, KO it. So we're going to flip over the top card of our deck. And it is a 0-cost card, and it does provide resources, so we're going to have to KO that card. So it'll go over to our KO'd section, and then we have defeated this henchman, so he's going to go to a victory pile now, and he's going to be worth 1 point for that victory pile at the end of the game. And then that player's out of cards. He can't purchase anything else for his turn, and he's defeated a villain, so his turn is over at that point. Now that you've seen how a couple of turns work, I want to talk a little bit more about the villain deck. So there's a couple important things to remember with it. So again, we've seen how the villains move into the city and how they push other villains, but if you have a bystander, a scheme twist, or a master strike card come up, it's never going to push any of the villains further along. So let's go ahead and flip over the next couple cards of the deck, and we'll see how some of those cards work. So the next card is a master strike, so again, it would not cause any villains to move, so even if our master cleaver was over here, it would not cause him to move because the master strike does not take up a space. So at this point, then the master strike is going to go over here into the strike section, and then we're going to consult our mastermind, which says that for the master strike, each player must reveal the gray symbol or the magic symbol, or the hero is going to gain a wound. So each of our players would look through their hands, which right now we have just starting hands, so nobody is going to have that. So each of our players would receive a wound card that would go straight into their discard pile. Flipping over the next card, then we have a scheme twist card. So again, those would be placed in the twists spot, and we would consult the scheme, which this is our first scheme twist, so it says stack the twist by the masterminds and nothing will happen. If this was the second, fourth, or sixth, the current player would discard a card, and then you would place the twist as normal, and then you would draw another card from the villain deck. So looking at the next card is a bystander. So when a bystander comes out, it would be attached to the villain that is closest to the villain deck. So at this point, it would be the master cleaver, and it would simply be placed behind it. If there was no villains out on the field, then it would be attached to the mastermind. Now, when a player defeats a villain that has a bystander in it, then that player would also gain the bystander into their victory pile. And then as the villains move, so let's go ahead and fill this up with some more villains. So we'll go ahead and say that all of our spaces are filled with villains. And our next draw happens to be a villain, so it's going to cause a villain to escape. So all the villains would move over, and the villain would move into the escape section. So if the villain itself has escape conditions, you would resolve those. You would go ahead and KO a hero that costs 6 or less in the HQ. And if it has a bystander with it as well, then each of the players is going to discard one and only one card, no matter how many bystanders were with that escaped villain. Attacking the mastermind works pretty much the same way you would attack any other villain. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. So we'll go ahead and start another player's turn. So first off, we'll flip over the top card, and it's another villain, so we're okay there. And then that player will go ahead and reveal his cards. So he's got a wound card, which isn't going to count as anything. A couple resource cards. And a couple of attack cards. So he has enough in attack cards to do a wound to the mastermind. And the mastermind special conditions, which it says the 6-shooter gets +6 strike if there is one villain in Chinatown. So there are no villains in Chinatown at this point. So he is only at 7. So we can go ahead and do a couple of things. We can do some purchasing if we want to, and we can do some damage. Now, we could choose to alternatively attack one of these guys if we wanted to, but we're going to go ahead and go after the mastermind. So the first thing we're going to do is spend our 2 cards to go after him. So these will go to our discard, and then we will do 1 wound to the mastermind. So he has his cards behind him. These are randomly shuffled, and the player chooses 1. The rest will go back behind him, and you'll resolve the effects of this one. So it says for his fight, you'll rescue 1 bystander for each master strike that has been played. Currently, we don't have any master strikes, so you wouldn't rescue any bystanders. But if there was, say, one out there, you would simply take 1 bystander from the deck and add it to your victory pile. At that point, we've resolved the fight effects on this, so then this will be moved to that player's victory pile. And then the player can continue his turn by purchasing other cards or doing whatever he wants. So we'll go ahead and spend these 3 here, and we'll purchase this card here, restock that, and we can't do anything with the wound card, and we did defeat a villain, so we won't be able to get rid of that. So it'll go to the discard, and then that player will draw a new hand of 6 cards, and his turn will be over. Now I'd like to take a closer look at some of the hero cards and how they work, and how those little symbols up in the top corners work. So as we talked about earlier, some of the hero cards are going to have different symbols in the top corner. And some cards are going to be affected by some of these cards when played. So for example, with this one, the Boom Gem, this one states with his special ability, if a card with that symbol has already been played this turn, then you're going to gain +1 strike on top of the 4 that you would get normally. So what that means is that you can't simply just play this card even though it has that symbol in it. You must play another card before you play this card in order to benefit from that. So if we use this card first with that symbol, then this card would get the special ability that is listed on this card. And that applies to each of the cards that has those special symbols that are required in their text. They must be used before that card that requires them in order for those conditions to be met. Running out of cards in some decks is not a big deal, but running out of cards in other decks will cause the game to end. So if you run out of cards in the Uncle Chu, Wounds, or Bystander deck and are required to draw another card, then you simply will not draw a card in those decks and nothing else will happen. If you run out of cards in the Villain deck and Hero deck before you've completed the conditions for the scheme, then you would finish your turn and the game would end in a tie between the good and the evil. And that at that point you had not won or lost. The final showdown is the small way that the game adds a little bit of a competitive edge. Basically, this is a fully cooperative game where the players are all working together and will win or lose as a group. But the final showdown kind of gives a little bit of a perk to one player, and at the end of the game, one player will be named the top hero that has the most victory points. So when the players fight the mastermind and defeat the last tactic card that he has behind him, then we enter a final showdown step. So the player would finish his turn as normal, the one that defeats him, and then that player would draw a new hand as normal, and then the next player in turn would go. And at this point, then no new villain cards are revealed. The player cannot purchase any more heroes from the HQ or fight villains that are out there. He simply gets his hand of 6 cards and will add up those cards' values for both recruitment and for attack. So with our player here, he has nothing for the wound card, so we can simply discard that card completely. And he has 2 attack points with this card and 4 attack points with that card. And he does not have any magic to add any bonuses to that card, as he could if he did, which he doesn't. So we have 6 points there, and you would count up your recruitment points as well, so we have 4 there. So he has a total of 10 points. So then his turn would be over. He would not redraw any cards, and this will affect other players, as players need to draw cards with certain cards to add additional bonuses. So then we would go over to the next player. Again, we would not draw from the villain deck, and he would simply do the same thing. So this card lets him draw a new card, so we would reshuffle that deck and draw a new card. All right, and then these cards you would flip a coin for, but no matter which way you go, they're going to be worth 2 points. So you got 4 points there, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then this one says, reveal the top card of the hero deck if you wish, and you cannot recruit it, but if you reveal it and it's an Eddie card or a card with the gray symbol on the top, you'll gain 2 strikes. So it is, and so we will gain 2 strikes, which makes our player over here at 11, which means that he has 1 more point than this player, and so he would be the top person for the showdown, and so he would receive the final card for the mastermind. At that point, then each of the players is going to total up the victory points in their victory pile, and the player that has the most points at the end will be the overall winning hero. But again, like I said, all the players have considered to have won the game at that point as well. So I hope you guys found that video helpful. As always, if you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comments section below, and I'll do my best to answer them. And if you like what I do, if you enjoy watching these videos or you find them helpful, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to my channel, as it really does help me. It helps me grow and get new games for you guys and keep me motivated, of course, because these videos do take a lot out of me and they are a lot of work. So please let me know what you guys think, and give me those subscriptions and those likes. And until next time, I'll see you guys later.